I met Will just before lockdown last year, and Will was starting a journey of his own to learn about how his ancestors breathed. So today it's a huge honour to be sitting here with Will Fleming, who has been on an amazing journey to understand breath, its life force, and how your ancestors breathed and what it means to you. So welcome here today, Will. It's fantastic to be here. So much has happened.
So much has happened for us all. I like how you explain what I do. Can you come home and tell my family? Because sometimes I don't know how to explain it, but you hit every point. And the journey, we often talk about the journey. Yeah. Wow. If you're open to the journey, it's one heck of a ride.
What got you? Well, why did you go down this journey in the first place?
Like, I've thought about that a lot. So I have to really take my hat off to the hard work my grandparents did in providing their little mokopuna space.
Yeah.
They didn't have that. They were worried about money, food, power, shelter. Those are things that I've probably had a little bit too much of, but it's definitely a gift. So I'm 40 and I've only just found, people call it the calling or the meaning, but I just think it's something that I really love doing. Yeah. I really love exploring. I get into flow when I think about breathing. I think breathing gets you into flow. It's practical, you can measure it. And there's little links to the past, which I think we're always thinking about the future.
Yeah.
How cool is it to think if we slow our breathing down, we'll actually be breathing in the way they did. They wouldn't know how we breathe. They don't walk around. Maybe if there's a big something coming at you.
Yeah.
But most times they got themselves out of that zone. And we breathe in a way which feels like there's always something coming at us.
Yeah.
Even when we're safe.
Yeah.
Even when we're warm. Even when we're happy. So that's been my little journey as to how do I find out the techniques they used. One of the things I think when we think about breathing, we think about yoga. Maybe breathing in a positive light, we think about yoga. Then we think about the Eastern culture. Well, Māori and Pacific and European had breathing ways, breathing protocols. They put that through some of the religious side of, prayer is timed out to make you breathe slower, to make you calm down. I just think it's interesting that it's not right at the tip of our breath to talk about. If you ask someone how to breathe in a panicked way, we know.
Yep.
Straight into it, hyperventilate. What's the opposite?
Yep.
No one's got a name for that.
No.
So we just call it breathing.
Yeah. And we find, from an Asthma New Zealand perspective, we find it fascinating that for some reason Kiwis don't take their breathing seriously at all. We are some of the fastest breathers. We're some of the shallowest breathers. So for you, in terms of this journey, what have been some of the things that have really shocked and surprised you?
Well, one of the things that really surprised me was learning how simple it is to slow your breathing down. The mere fact that you can actually manually take over that system. And maybe it's happening now for people listening or watching. They're like, wow, I can just sit here and breathe through my nose, if you can. Or I can slow my breathing down. But if you don't, you just leave it to the auto system. And it doesn't take much mindset to think if you're already stressed, you're going to automatically breathe that way. Yeah. The other thing was learning about noses and the big filter we have on our face and the hand fist that goes in behind that. That's built to filter your air, warm it, cool it, take some of the pathogens away from life. We just think it collects dust and we blow it out. And you partly do. But then the mind-blowing realization of you have to use it at night so that you're not doing all of that filtering through your mouth.
Yeah. So were you a mouth breather or
Absolutely.
a nose breather?
And I have it written all over me. One, I have crooked teeth still.
Yep.
I don't know if that's a badge of honor going forward, but that suggests that my mouth was open as a child.
Yeah.
While I'm sleeping and while I'm talking, while I'm playing. Look, and I try not to get too deep into this, but my understanding is the tongue's supposed to sit at the top of the palate. Give a gentle resistance to the top of your face to widen. Those big, nice jaws we like, like our ancestors had, these big mouths, straight teeth, were from having the mouth closed, And so I got these, me and my generation have these elongated faces and just mouth open. We didn't know. No one knew.
Did you know about nose breathing before you went on this journey?
No. And I think I represent a lot of people thinking, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
We just breathe, don't we? Absolutely we do. But there's these foundational things about, that I think some of us have missed, so we have to understand what that means now.
Yeah.
I'm never going to have the perfect straight big jaw as my ancestors did, but I can mimic some of the things that they did. So I haven't quite learnt everything because that's my journey, but I do know that people purposefully had challenges with holding breath. And I know that in some of the Tongan societies, they would hold boulders at the bottom of the ocean. And I thought that's a really interesting way to prepare yourself. It's not just a game. So I tried to understand what were they doing, and they were playing around with their tolerance to carbon dioxide and why? That was my question, why? And part of the answer is to have a resiliency to stress.
Wow.
So when the stress came on, you can imagine being in the big ships, huge waves, not knowing what's around the next wave. You had to have a certain resilience that you were going to be okay because we got this, and they were doing that on the ocean. So I can imagine, and I try and imagine how they were doing it. They were keeping that mouth shut, focusing, slow breathing, probably as the waves going. And, when you capsize, breathe panic. But even if you talk to lifeguards, they'll say, don't do that. You get caught in that rip. What are you supposed to do? Lie on your back, stay calm. And I mean, that's what our lifeguards say. And they're the Kiwis of Kiwis.
Yes.
So the fact that there is a breathing culture, we just only talk about it once you're ripped out to sea.
Yeah.
And so, sorry,
That's
I get a little bit talky.
Yeah. No. Look, I think that's what's been so awesome is watching your journey here is somebody that came in that was a mouth breather, that knew nothing about breathing. And I think that's why this is so important, is because this week is Breathe Easy Week for Asthma New Zealand, and we really want to start to explore this journey of breath because for us, this is true to form. Nothing else matters when you can't breathe.
Exactly.
And many of our community have experienced that. It's harrowing.
Absolutely.
And so learning to breathe more effectively is critical. It is not just critical for those with respiratory disease. It's critical for us all, especially in this time of heightened stress, of increased levels of uncertainty, anxiety. And so, well, you've created up Manava.
Yep.
Tell me just a little bit about Manava. What is that?
Look, I say this probably in the most respectful way I can talk about myself. I like things simple. So when I search, I want something that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so when I was thinking of a name, what is this journey encapsulated in? I thought, well, what's the Pacific word for breathing, lungs? And I was about to have my mind blown. And again, so there's this word Manava, which is kind of translated within the Pacific to generally mean core. And I'm like, okay, good start, because that's given me a clue, right? You're into something. And then I was like, well, what's our core? It's our diaphragm. It is the breathing muscle. It's just we breathe, we don't use it, we're up here. And so I was like, great, that's another clue. And then when I realized that it's also the breath of life. So I was like, wow, that's three big things. I cross-referenced it to the Māori culture. They have a breath of life too with the hongi, and started realizing that the nose connects to the diaphragm and vice versa. And if you could trigger the nose to breathe deeper and slower, this diaphragm starts doing its business. And I just like the fact that I don't have to do anything. I just have to breathe through that. I have to slow it down to a rate. So I got fascinated with the slower breathing, and the Manava breathing that my friend Gareth and I kind of came up with is this idea that if you bring your rate down to between 4 and 10 breaths per minute, that your body recognizes that you're not being chased. mentally or physically.
Yeah.
And I love the manual override that can provide. So maybe something like a simulated calm. If you don't really like calm, then simulate it. And so when you bring it down to breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5, and breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5. It takes us a second because we're like, hey man, I'm starting to get bored. You slowed down your talking. What's happening? Well, that's the rate that they were breathing.
Yeah.
And so I found that through some research articles which were trying to explain this resonance breathing or cadence breathing. And this is at that rate between 4 and 10. So I thought, right, I need to find a rate between 4 and 10. So I chose 5.5 because when you look through the research papers, they started cross-referencing ancient prayer, and it all was at this 5.5. So I was like, that's another clue. And so I thought to myself, for people who are not sure about their own journey, if for thousands of years people who deeply believe are breathing in this pattern, you should just do that.
Yeah.
Because, okay, I'll probably say this and it might not come out right, but breathe in a way that might connect you with something.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You've got a dollar on each, So I started testing that out. One was seeing what that did to my heart rate, and it brought it down. 2, what it did to blood pressure, it brought it down. I put the oxygen monitor on, and I kept having a lower heart rate, but my blood saturation or the level of oxygen was up.
Wow.
And so, not to go too deep into it because I'm still early steps and I'm aware we're all on a journey, but if it works, it works, and it worked for them and it's working for me. So yeah, it's that simple though. It's that 5.5 in, 5.5 out, and I just would deeply encourage people to just have a go. One, you'll realize that you're in charge because you are. You can control your blinking and you can control your breathing. Yeah. And so it's a gift, and we can use it, and it manually overrides at least a little bit of life.
Yeah. Look, I can't wait to our next podcast, because in that we're going to use Manava breathing, you and I.
Yep.
And we're going to practice Manava breathing, and you're going to join us as well. We hope today in this conversation, if nothing else, you've got some questions that you're starting to ask yourself. And then when we start Manava breathing, you're going to be Manava breathing with us. Well, thank you so much. It's such a privilege, and it's so wonderful to see you evolving on this journey. For Asthma New Zealand, breathing should not be taken for granted, yet it is such an integral part of so much more than just life force. Absolutely. It determines the quality of life force that we often experience in our day. Absolutely. So thank you. Ka kite anō.